this is back to, there are more coming, and there's some already passed, having to do with what I was describing as survival speech and post-survival speech. And also the true original meaning of the idea of something being poetic is that at first we grunt, then we speak, and then a few take up poetic grunting. Cut into that kind of verbal discreteness, that absolute division, does belie the fact that ordinary people spread out between number 1 and number 2, and they're even now have been spreading out between number 2 and number 3. That is, quite ordinary people believe that they are being poetic. Quite ordinary people attempt to be poetic. But then if you understand also that once you get past the survival level of speech, everything after that is to varying degrees and in various forms mystical. That is, it's non-specific, it's non-concrete, it has nothing to do, more or less, nothing to do with absolute physical survival. Therefore it becomes poetic. That is, that the words mean more than they apparently mean. Which there is I was trying to point out a distinction between ordinary metaphor, the way I was using it, and a poetic, and the word poetic, the description. Because metaphor, of course, just means that what you're saying actually means something else. And all human speech, if it's past the survival level, if it's beyond mere grunting, that is, that you're starving to death, literally starving to death, and somebody walks up and says, "Would you like something to eat?" And you go, I intended that, not having majored in dramatics, but I intend that as a positive grunt, like, yes. "Would you like me not to cut you with this spear I have?" And you go, Beyond that, anything that's said becomes mystical, becomes metaphorical. That whatever's said means something else. For the simple reason that whatever you're talking about doesn't exist physically. And so you can't say, well, I'm here to talk about art tonight. And since art doesn't exist, I have nothing to say. Assuming that your reputation, or at least your job, is in the field of art. That you are a professor of art. Or mathematics, religion, economics. You cannot come out and say, I'm proud to have all of you here, I'm glad to see you in my class and signed up or paid your fee here for the course or whatever, and I am, yes, Dr. So-and-so, in the recognized expert in the field of economics, and since it doesn't exist, why am I going to lie to you? There's nothing I can say. On that basis, nothing would be said. The higher end of man's nervous system would not be growing, and therefore you must talk about that which, comparably speaking, to that which would be absolutely necessary to survive, which, thank God, economics is not, just to pick out one, is not one of the fields that we must have to survive, and you pick out your own. Since it is not necessary to physically survive, and it doesn't, in that sense, comparably, does not exist, therefore whatever you say has to be metaphorical. In the true sense of metaphor as opposed to symbolism, is why I threw in the poetic. Don't get... Do you realize that we bring you this non-commercially? Not even, it has nothing to do with stick-on nails. Because I was thinking about stick-on information. Except some of you already feel that you have been cut to the quick. Metaphors are not symbolism. Metaphors mean something other than they mean. Such as the old one, you can't teach some dirty dog ate my lunch when I was out of the room, a guy says about one of his fellow workers. A dirty dog is a metaphor. Because he knows a dirty dog didn't eat it. He didn't come back in and turn out the other guys there at the assembly line when he took a break and come back and say, well, I see some dirty dog ate my lunch again. He didn't think a dog came in and ate his lunch. He knew one of these guys did. It's a metaphor. Everything that a man says is metaphorical, beyond any survival grunting. But then I tried to change it a bit to get you to take another look at to say that we all start grunting. In the beginning we grunt. Then we speak. But as soon as you speak, you begin to speak, whether you want to or not, metaphorically, because that which you're speaking about doesn't exist. And so you've got your choice then. That's another diverging in the woods that man had his choice. Well, let's see. I am not to the point where civilized, we can think, we can split again as always, that man had his choice, figuratively speaking. About, well, let's see. Now that we can talk and we're not tied up constantly with just survival affairs, we can get into personal, avocational, non-survival matters. And since they don't exist, everyone I can think of right quick, let's see. I can either, therefore, now that I can barely talk, enough to involve myself in non-survival speech, and now realizing that doesn't exist, it's like I've suddenly got a car. Finally, after all these years, I have a car, and now I realize there's nowhere to go. So, I can either abandon the car, which I just got, or I guess I can sit in and go, wooden, 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 wooden. Wooden, wooden. I can put your arm out the window. Pretend. That is what I mean by metaphorical speech. That man had his choice. He just barely learned to speak. And realized, well, everything that I'm going to speak about, other than grunting, other than saying food, food, sex, sex, no, no. Other than that, he realized, well, all of it doesn't exist. So, I've got my choice. I can either abandon it, my car, my speech, or I can do something else. I can pretend. Like a man sitting in his car when he realized, I've got a car after all these years, these thousands of years, I am now a full-fledged civilized person. I have a car. And somewhere along the line it strikes man, but there's nowhere to go. So where are you going? You can get out and leave the car, but my God, it took thousands of years to get to the point that life gives us all a car. And you're going to be a sorehead and go, well, but there's nowhere to go. Okay, maybe so. But at least you got your choice. Life gave us free will, except for you Southern Baptists. I don't know what you're going to do. But you then had your choice. You can, just walk away from the car. But think about it. It took all these years for man to genetically, or for life to genetically, arrange things so that each person received a car. Used to, when you were born, all you got was a fig leaf or a club. No ratty cap. Some of that reused felt or something. But now life gives you a car. You can speak. You realize there's nowhere to go. So you can leave the car if you want to and just go, well, what the hell? Or, since man has this and can imagine, you can sit there, that's what I was doing with this, and go, wooden, wooden, wooden. Just sit there and, all right, well, you laugh, but it's either that or leave the car is the point. So when man realized he could talk, and he realized, but everything I've got to talk about now beyond the survival level is grunt. It's just grunt kind of cleaned up, but it doesn't exist. It doesn't mean anything. So he could go, well, in that case, hell, I'm not going to talk. And walk away from the car. You do understand that man can't do that. Plus, if you had any sense, it was the highest degree, the highest manifestation of man's development, and why would you walk away from it? That's why I went through all the car metaphor. That there it is, a beautiful car. And just because you can't go anywhere, at first you might go, I'm going to go out and leave. Yeah. Then you're back where you started. You're out there, roaming around the weeds, cutting your feet. At least you can sit there, you can play the radio, you can put your arm out the window. You can pretend, I guess, get a little fan and put in your face, and like the wind's blowing, you're actually going. You can do all that. I mean, if that's your choice, why abandon the car? So that was what I was trying to get to consider when men realized, well, there's nothing to talk about. All right, then don't talk. What the hell? I mean, went to all this trouble, I can talk, I got a car in my throat. So let's see. Just because I can't talk about anything real, I realize I can pretend though. We can start talking about, why don't we start human institutions? Why don't we start religions, educations? And it's like everybody's sitting in their own car. We're all in this huge lot. Everybody realizes, well, there is no such thing. Like there are no highways. We can't go anywhere. But you know it. They know it. So you can look around and some of them do get out of their car and leave. They don't count. They end up, and the rest of us have to look after them. So all the sane people, they realize, well, all right, we're all sitting here like in this gigantic drive-in or this gigantic parking lot, and we can all leave our cars. Yeah, we all know that. We all realize it's not going anywhere. Yeah, we all realize that. So Somebody goes, wouldn't, and then you do it. And you think, well, what the hell? It looks kind of silly maybe at first, but when you look around and every sane person on the planet's doing it, everybody in the parking lot, priest, your father, people in business suits, people who look intelligent, they're all going, wouldn't. And you realize, well, none's going anywhere, we're all just sitting here. So then you don't feel so bad. Even if you wanted to personally, the price has been paid before you. Ken and Barbie and Adam and Eve already had to go through that about, boy, don't we look stupid sitting here, until they realized, well, everybody else is sitting here. So that's the new religion, is Barbie died for your sins. I'm sorry, the Southern Baptists had too much. Barbie died for your embarrassment, is what I meant. For your chagrin. In other words, they already went through the fact of, hey, these cars not going anywhere. But, we aren't either, so. And they looked around and realized, well, everybody else is going to play along. Wouldn't. And so they already paid for that. But it goes from, once you realize that everything that man talks about is metaphorical, that does not mean what it says. Of course, if you understand that, many people get greatly relieved, because then you're no longer concerned over the fact that you're surrounded with this great, you think, burgeoning possibility of either having a great thought or perhaps developing a brain tumor. And some of you have had these great, just on the verge of insights, like, I wonder if actual religion or education or morality, or I wonder if that actually means anything. Boy, how dangerous. The joke being, once you understand that nothing exists, then at least you're over that one about, well, let's see. What if I'm wrong and there is a God? I mean, like the Baptists say, or like somebody says. Or what if it turns out in my older age that I suddenly realize I should have gotten my master's? What if my life is ruined when I realize I dropped out too soon? When you realize it's all metaphor. And everybody else, and the more you worry about it, the more you have to go, beat on the dice, sing along, blow your hair in the wind. Once you realize that, you're relieved of a whole lot of problems that everyone else thinks are going on at the parking lot, which actually turns out, I said a parking lot, but if you imagine everybody in one parking lot, it becomes like a desert, and therefore you begin to suffer over what is commonly referred to under such tropic conditions as mirages. That is, you realize everything outside the window of this car, since the car is a metaphor, everything I think I see is a metaphor. There's no question about, well, look out there, though. Is that God or is that my imagination? It's all your imagination. Speaking metaphorically. Speaking metaphorically. So, first we grunt, then we speak, then a few pursue poetic grunting. It appears to be that number 3 circled back on itself, except for poetic grunting. Poetic I was trying to get you to consider now, not to play linguistics games, since they don't exist either. Which, of course, what makes this easy is just to kick around and whip up on mirages, because they can't fight back. Then is it to take note of that. Mirages can't fight. All right. Using the word poetic the third time instead of metaphorical, I was trying to get you to see some distinction, since everything, I could go back to that 3-stage of this item, that first we grunt, then we speak. The speak part is the post-survival. The grunt's the survival level. The speak is the post-grunt survival level, which is, by my own description, is all metaphorical. Period. It's just metaphorical because it does not exist comparable to the first stage. Comparing the two, the second one does not exist. And so you could go ahead and say, first we grunt, then we speak metaphorically. That it's just a given. And so then the third part, I can't just say metaphorical again, because everybody's already speaking metaphorically. People that don't even know what it is. Bricklayers, uneducated people, the least civilized people on this planet right now. Whatever it is they're talking about, festivals they have, trying to pray to the seasons, whatever they're doing, if it does not have to do with the actual survival, they are speaking metaphorically. If they're speaking is the point, you're speaking metaphorically. So I was making the third stage, when I say poetic, it's not just metaphorical then. You've upped the ante on metaphor. See, to get to the third stage, you've got to realize the second stage for yourself. You've got to understand what I'm pointing at, that, yeah, that's true. There is no argument. It's not a matter of weighing about what in life is real. You know, is one religion closer to the truth than another? Give me a break. That's like saying, does economics actually mean more than meteorology? No, that's too easy. Does the field of economics, the discipline, nay, the science, and economics, an economist made me say that. Well, he bribed me. The science, the discipline, the science of economics. What are you going to do? Sit around and worry about which is the more important? The field, the discipline, the art, if not the science of economics, or philosophy? Give me 2 breaks, would you? Once you understand that, then you got number 2 covered. That's all metaphorical. But then the third part is like, then you turn the metaphorical, you up the ante, you turn it on its head inside of your own understanding, because then it becomes poetic. That when you speak metaphorically, when you think metaphorically, which if you're talking about what everybody else is, your explanations, they're metaphorical to start with, whether you agree with them or not. If you hear somebody saying the most important science or discipline in the world is economics, and you go, boy, is that a bunch of crop, a crop of croup, elixir dexy. See, just by you naysaying it, you are still, you could say, wait a minute, if somebody said theology is the most important discipline, you go, hey, that's none but people's imagination. That's just a leftover. You're doing the same thing. You can't attack a metaphor. You can't attack a mirage. Well, not and claim, at least with me, that you have any semblance of sanity. That's like a man, that was my little attempted humor before. You know, these major breakthroughs that people say, I'm beginning to wonder if there's actually a God. I'm beginning to wonder if these people in Mississippi and Louisiana are actually being visited by people from other planets. I'm going to tell you the truth. I've got my doubts. And we wonder where the next genius generation is coming from. There are people who say, I sometimes wonder, just because these guys have big jobs paying over $100,000 a year and they work for the government and they smoke cigars and wear pinstripe suits and they're called before a Senate committee and they say, here he is, the head of the Treasury, our leading economic forecaster. And he says, well, I can guarantee you this, within the next quarter, such and such is going to happen to the prime interest. And a man somewhere, sitting alone, an important thinker, off on his own, ex parte, sits there and goes, I sometimes wonder if these guys actually know what they're talking about. Well, I just wanted to relieve your mind because I know some people say that the level of education is going down in this country and we're turning out a bunch of illiterates. No. Let that be an inspiration to you. God, you didn't get serious, did you? Attacking a mirage. Give me a break. So it's not just that you are disagreeing with the second level that people now speak, parenthetically, metaphorically, that they have no choice. Then the third level, I said, then a few pursue poetic grunting, because you're now dealing with, comparably speaking, an illusionary world, a metaphorical world. I don't mean illusionary that it doesn't exist. We all know that religion, economics, economic forecasting, philosophy, it all exists, right? So we know it exists. When I say imaginary, I just mean that metaphorically. But to go past that, you can't just say, well, all right, I see through it. If you see through it, you've accomplished nothing. You said, yeah, you're right, all that's a bunch of crap. You know, religion and education and all that. You know, anybody can say that. That's not moving into another stage. At best, you're holding your own. You're still at their level. And at worst, you're almost back to grunting. You're just a smart ass. Oh, you might get a job and become a critic and get paid for it. But you're still a smart ass. You're still fighting the same tar baby, metaphorically, as everyone else. But what you do then is take the metaphorical world, and I said, begin to a few grunt poetically, pursue poetic grunting, is then you take what everybody else is talking about, and you've got your whole new explanation of it. See, they think they're talking about something real, and if you get past the second stage, you realize it's all metaphorical. But then you begin to look at what they're doing, which is metaphorical, and you turn it poetically. Do you take what they say, you take their explanations, but then you mean more by it than they mean by it. You have turned metaphors into your own kind of, you subject it to your own poetic interpretation. You don't, it's not a correction. You certainly don't go tell anyone. I mean, that's not the point. But you now take what is metaphor from top to bottom to start with, and you're not arguing with it. You're not shooting at mirages and wasting ammunition. You're not trying to correct metaphors. You're not laughing at metaphors. You simply realize it's all a metaphor. So where do you go from there? Then you take the metaphor, and what I was attempting to get you to consider by new explanations, that there's always another explanation for everything. Always. That is taking whatever the current explanation is and seeing. If it's a widespread explanation, it's worth, I don't know, maybe 5 seconds of your time, or it might be worth, you might go back to it 2 or 3 times. But whatever is the latest intellectual fad, the latest idea, the latest scientific theory, the latest artistic school, whatever is going on in the metaphorical world, just whatever caught your interest, you can look at it, and you can take a poetic, or you can put a poetic personal spin on it. It's not taking it apart, it's not attacking it, it's that you look upon life, no matter who said it, experts, ordinary people. They said something, and it's metaphorical to start with. You don't even have to think about that. If you think about it, you're back with them. You're just one stage above grunting. Or if you're arguing with them, if you're saying that thing, well, those goddamn idiots, you're thinking that to a TV set, to a newspaper article, or some economist, or some religious person, or some scientist, and you think, well, those damn idiots. Of course, you do that, I don't know why you listen to this, because you need to be a paid critic. It is not dealing with that. It's simply seeing what's going on. It's just a new, natural, as much as a marching band coming by, non-stop. It's a new description of something. But it's coming from out there. It's metaphorical. You can always explain it another way, and when you do it, that is what becomes a new level of poetic grunting. You know where you are? Light them there. See, that was sort of a different version, because it points out there at the tail end that once you reach what we've been calling some area wherein you can almost think nonpartisanly, you can think for yourself in some way that can't really be described, is this description was slightly different than me saying that you began to take a poetic view of the metaphor of life, which is all of ordinary intellectual life to start with. But this one points out that, in a sense, you begin to see metaphors as plainly as ordinary people think they see non-metaphors. Which, if it makes you feel any better, I was going to say it's almost the same thing, but it's not, or I wouldn't have put it 2 different ways. But what ordinary people see as plain, and I don't mean just physical survival, what ordinary sane people see as plain, that collectively right now, if we had Group X somewhere in the world, some kind of almost internal civil war, some nationalistic skirmish has started, and it's out of hand now, and a country, an erstwhile country, is falling apart, and we've got the X group of people, religiously or racially, and the Y group of people, and it's to the point they're killing each other. They're sexually assaulting mainly the women. I don't like to think about the variation of 2 groups fighting. Never mind. The horrors of war are bad enough without considering that. Guy jumps on the train in the 1880s. No, that's an old joke. I'd simply want, collectively, we've got Group X and Group Y, neighbors, conflicting nationalities, religions, whatever. And one group is acting so uncivilized, so beastly, so horribly, that the other group says, Group X says Group Y are surely fumes from the fiery inferno. They're certainly just evil personified. To them, that's reality, that's literal. I'm just trying to figure out something so that you wouldn't immediately jump on just physical. But the ordinary people, the ex-people, collectively right now, they say, let's assume that's a fair description, that Group Y attacked them like dastardly dogs in the night, killing children, burning down homes. They didn't even have a chance. And so all the survivals of Group X say that Group Y are horrible. That's the literal truth. Then they can make it metaphorical, which they will have to, since it's metaphorical to begin with, other than the survival aspect, which I didn't want to get into. Run fast as you can. See, because if they're killing them, it is. But right after that, they have to turn it into a metaphor. Because as soon as they start describing, well, those people are nothing but fumes from the fiery, see, it's metaphor. Those people are nothing but Satan's grandchildren. Evil, turned loose on this with metaphor. In the same way, the ordinary people think that they are speaking plainly about the obvious literal truth, that man over there, he killed my daughter, he killed my mother, that man is a sorry son of a bitch. I mean, I'm just trying to make it as plain for you to get somewhere to start from. They say, well, that's plain. That's no metaphor, that is plain talk. If you can think, now forget the example. If you can think, then you look as plainly on metaphor as they look metaphorically up on the plane. If you stay with the prevailing mirage of post-survival thinking, then you are sitting in a very public section of the bus. That's one reason that we have what appears to be the class system, to get off the subject just for a second, off the subject. I'd like to see you try. I resent that. That's one reason we have the class system throughout the world, even those places like, where are we? Finland? Wherever we are, all places say, "Oh, we're classless." When you get right down to it, well, true. You know, we're all a bunch of grunters. But the thing is, since there is no distinction amongst ordinary people, it's why we have fads and fashions. That's why, although everybody's on that same bus, or put another way, everybody's sitting in that same parking lot in a car that won't go anywhere. And when you get a little money ahead, we're talking about the post-survival age, you want some distinction. I mean, you turn around and you decide that you'll change your name to Rockefeller since nobody's close enough to stop you. And you think, well, I got extra money. And so you start buying little doggies and fuzzy dice to hang on the rearview mirror of your car. You still ain't going anywhere. Or you have somebody pinstripe it. Or you get somebody to buy a fake Rolls Royce grill and stick it on front of your Volkswagen. That's what class is. Well, why else? We've been through this, and this is not having anything to do with possessions, as you know, because I'm speaking metaphorically. Why would anybody in their right mind go and spend $10,000 for a pearl choker when you can go to Toys R Us and take one off of a Barbie doll, one of those big ones, that look just as good? I mean, you got to do is have average vision. You look at it, especially the woman's good looking wearing it anyway, and you look, and who the hell knows the difference? Why do you do it? Because there is no distinction between people. Why do we have a class system? Why do we have the apparent upper class? Why do we have cheap clothes and the same kind of clothes made out of the same material, wool, cotton, whatever it is, or God's material, polyester double knit? I know nobody asked me, but it wasn't that theological professor at Emory that got things going downhill a couple of decades ago that announced God is dead. That wasn't where we went astray in this country. It was when polyester fell out of style. You mark my words. Either that or bite my finger. The apparent class system, the apparent distinction between people, I just wanted you to understand, is because there is none with ordinary people. It's a damn herd. And if you got a whole lot of money, what are you going to do? You're still a damn cow if you're an ordinary person. If you're a Smith, Jones, or Rothschild, or DuPont, or Pudont, you're still just a dunderheaded cow. You're living in a mirage. You're sitting in a car, but you get some money ahead. The car is going nowhere. You know it. Everybody else knows it. But you got now a whole back seat full of money. Well, what else you going to do? You can't eat it. Fancy your car up. Wear a hat, get better hairstyle, and it makes the people around you, of course, Ken and Barbie found that out. It makes other ordinary dunderheaded cows get jealous. They'll get attention. They'll look at you. I mean, you're not going anywhere anyway. Why not? I'm not picking on them. But I just pointing out that is why we have the class system. That's why some cows think they're better than others. It takes, of course, two to tango. It takes a performer and an audience, and other cows play like. Well, you are better than us. On the basis they know that nobody's better than anybody else. Nobody's going anywhere. But what the hell? We're stuck here in this parking lot for 60 years. We got to do something. What was the news item again? What was the last? No, the last one.
You want it?
No.
Or read it?
Yeah, let me see it. Well, let me jump back to what the actual item was itself. That if you're on the bus, if you're in the parking lot, and you sit there, you're going to see the same thing as everybody else sees. Now, I know in the worldwide parking lot, which all of you know, that seems to change from place to place and time to time, and all of the Irish Protestants sitting in one area may slightly look out and see different sights than the Catholic Irish, and etc. I know all that. But in general, the same people on this planet, more and more, and it's almost to the point that there's a certain kind of intellectual uniformity, taking into account the difference in language and etc. But that almost every sane person, the middle class of the world, the same people of the world, sitting there over this huge parking lot, they all see more or less the same sights. And if they don't, now communication is such that they can check, hey, I thought I saw so-and-so over here, and I thought we always believe so-and-so. And it's like now, almost within minutes, a short period of time, they can rearrange their explanation of reality. That all the same people in the world, it becomes more and more balanced and uniform. So if you sit in the public side, that is, if you live a public life, that is, if you live by the collective thinking, you're going to see what everybody else sees. That's it. The article pointed out, it was using the bus, if you remember what it was. If you sit in the public section of the bus and look out of the murky windows, surely you understand that. If this wasn't something else, why even bother pointing it out? This is a poetic take on the metaphors of life. That is, you create your own explanations. You begin to look at life in a different way. There was a fine line, which is why I really stopped. It said, a man who has not explained things to himself has never had anything explained. Take that, you old psychiatrist, or whoever it is hiding under a piano. Does that define a real thinker to somebody? Or what it is I must poetically mean by the metaphor? That if you have not explained things to yourself, you've never had anything friggin' explained. And of course you understand that, then you go, well, no wonder I never understood anything. I mean, all of your life, some of you spent perfectly good money, perfectly good effort. You went out and tracked down priests and rabbis, educators, mystics. And what would you tell me, would you explain so-and-so? And they would go, well, they got to say yes, or else abandon their car. And if it was somebody old enough that you went to seek advice from them, they're not going to get out of their car now. What the hell, where are they going to go? So they say, you go to somebody and you say, I would like your explanation of, fill in the blank, life. And they go, they drop their arm out the window and look distinguished, and they say, well, you came to the right place. But as you found out, nobody explained anything. That is, if you still have any sanity and sense yourself, you realize that no one ever explained anything. But if you understand the last part of that item, then you understand why. Because if you hadn't explained it to yourself, you never had to explain. All you did was look out the window with everybody else. And they debated it, discussed it. Some of the people at the window went, now I'm an expert in this part of the country. That is a Sicilius cactus. And somebody next to him goes, don't listen to him. I had an uncle that went to college, and he was crazy. Well, do you know what kind of cactus it is? I'm not even sure it's a cactus. It could be his imagination. I saw him drinking. That is 60 years of being in the public section of the bus. I mean, it's entertaining to them, I guess. Well, I say it's entertaining to them. It's either that or them go nutso from boredom, I guess. You're sitting there staring out the window. You have to finally turn around to whoever's in the car next to you in the parking lot. Or back to this metaphor, whoever's with you on the bus next to you, you go, what do you think? I don't know. Where you from? What's your sign? Didn't I used to know your uncle? You just talk about nothing. Or you can talk about important stuff. But with ordinary people in the public area of the bus, it's all metaphor. And it explains nothing. You just simply have to know that by now. And I was hoping that some people would go, I did it for you. God, that hurts. That a man who has not explained things to himself has never had anything explained. That is, if you do not have a personal view, if you cannot look out of a window and the sights you see are your own explanations, then you got no explanations. You may have the common ones, like everyone else, because they're free. Life gives them to you. You're born with them. But you and I both know it hadn't explained squat. Go ahead. We're getting behind. But look into it real plainly now, directly into it. I was already pointing out that everything men talk about at the ordinary level is metaphorical. You know, whether they know it or not. And of course, most of the time they do not know it and they would deny it, as they should. Or else then they would be left point blank with the fact that, wait a minute, this is all some kind of mirage anyway. You're right, and then everything would fall apart. But the way it expands is a place becomes more and more civilized. The way I put it there was a place is truly civilized, to make it short and sweet in the presentation, when they knowingly, when they, by their own definitions, when metaphors and symbolism, they take to be superior than plain thought and point blank thought, plain talk and point blank thought. They have to. It's not a flaw, but that's when you know it's getting civilized. That's past the grunt stage. That they say we not only are past grunting, we're not only out of the woods, out of the trees, out of the savannas and the wetlands, we're now in cities, we're civilized people. We're not simply grunters, we're now speakers, thinkers. And it goes on a while, and the parade goes by. Sometime later, they even say, we're not only speakers and thinkers. We not only now think and speak about food, sex. We can now do it metaphorically. We can talk about the dining experience. We can talk about feeding the soul. We can talk about romance instead of just sex. We can talk about the romantic drive that fuels man's higher aspirations toward the cosmos. Which is all, that's fine. It's another But you're truly civilized, and I was going to point out to real thinkers, in a sense, you might be too civilized. In other words, you've gone too far on stage 2. When groups take that to be superior, that to themselves, that is the proof of their increasing sophistication, the increasing degree of their civility, their intelligence, is that they now see the metaphorical, the symbolic, as being superior. They should. Taken to another level, I could use the same description. Is that what, hey, what's new? I got to work on this. I got to chew on this. I just got it. It's only been, those of you who are listening, 45, 50 minutes ago, I pointed out, everybody's born with a car. But they very shortly, even the ordinary people, realize this car is not going anywhere. So what are you going to do? Leave it? Go back and stumble in the woods and grunt? Or sit there and play? Why not? That's the same position that whatever you now understand, whatever new explanation you have, whatever, I suddenly realize that death is a metaphor for life. I suddenly realize that vegetables are a metaphor for a half-death. I don't know what. Whatever it is, to you, I was doing it like me saying to you, well, so what? What else is new? And then your idea to you, you can do it to yourself, or take this item and try to apply it to yourself, and you think, well, wait a minute. It took me years to suddenly get over being so jealous, being so demanding, being so hostile. It took me 30 years. And you're just saying abandon it? It took you 30 years of what? It took you 30 years of sitting in a car going brutal and playing like. Whatever the explanation is, if you've already thought it, it's bad news. Forget it. It's too late. What else is new? Read that one more time.
You can tell that a place is truly civilized when metaphor.
At the ordinary level, back to I'm going to end on that one. As they should, as people should in general, and as you should as an individual if you were still a generalized people. You're supposed to see metaphor and symbolism as being superior. It feels right that if you get past the point of being just a grunter, just a survivalist, just a feral animal somewhat, some way you stumbled into a suit and you're in the city, if you're anything beyond that, and you aspire even out in the public forum to be a thinker, to be intelligent, it is metaphorical, it is symbolic, that now seems to be of the greater interest, that seems to offer the most to an increasing amount of intelligence. It's supposed to. But that's what I was trying to get at when I might have got funny there a couple of minutes ago, that it's too late. That whatever you come up with that's metaphorical, you say, well, I used to worry about things specifically. I used to worry about people specifically. I used to be too concerned about local, specific affairs. But now that I begin to think, may I say, more metaphorically, more symbolically, it's like my mind is opened up and I do not worry that much, or I'm not tied to those kinds of specifics anymore. Good. What's new? Now what? And people, no. Because they take that as being almost a destination. Well, it took me years to get over being so specific-minded, of worrying so much about the literal. I have now become almost a cosmic, metaphorical thinker. And at that level, that is superior. That is a sign of civilization. But so is seeing a car not going anywhere and imagining it is. And getting to the point that, well, when I started, I knew it wasn't going anywhere. But now, not going anywhere and sitting here in this fine car that life gave me, I see as a metaphor. So it doesn't bother me as much. Which, if you're not following, all that is another description of becoming religious. And so now to you, I am a superior-minded person. My insight is more complex. I think now in more depth. I think in greater dimensions. Because in a sense, this car is not going anywhere, if you want to put it that way. But now I see having this car as a metaphor. I see not going anywhere as being a symbolism. Okay, now what? And the feeling is, well, people, what do you mean now what? Because if you take back to religious as being sort of the ultimate common public form of metaphor and symbolism, a religious person, someone who actually says that they're religious. Now, so I'll die for my religion, I'll die. You cannot convince me of all the kind of spiritual beliefs and pictures I have from our holy teachings. Okay. In other words, as far as they're concerned, they have reached the heights of metaphorical existence on this planet. I'm not saying they're dumb or stupid. It doesn't matter what religion. And it could be outside religion. That's just the easiest to describe. To them, they have reached the pinnacle. And of course, it fits religion because if there's anything greater than that, it's in the afterlife, which all religions have an afterlife. I'll even do better. I'll even know more. If you stop there, if you take metaphor and symbolism as being the ultimate, you're at a dead end. And the inference being, there's another level, almost like, if you recall, of poetic grunting. There's something beyond metaphor and symbolism. And it has a strange resemblance to the plain and the literal. Thank God we're out of tape.